Not yet.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and call in those in the lobby if they wish to come in. No pressure. You are absolutely welcome to stay out there if you so wish. But I just wanted to welcome all of you here. It is a cold December evening in the middle of the holiday season. So the fact that everybody has showed up to pay attention, to learn about developments in our community matters a ton. So thank you all so much for being here from the bottom of my heart. For those of you who don't know me, I am Arvada Mayor Lauren Simpson. It is a real pleasure to be here with all of you. I do apologize in advance that I got to skedaddle as soon as I'm done. This time of season, I tend to be triple booked every night of the week, and tonight is unfortunately no different. So I do beg your apologies in advance that I'm unable to stay. I wish I could, I genuinely do. Quickly, I would like to recognize a few of our other representatives in the room. I see State Senator and County Commissioner-elect Rachel Zenzinger, as well as County Commissioner Andy Kerr. And I did see County Commissioner Tracy Kraft-Tharp as well. Hi, Tracy. Oh, perfect. And Ray Rears, Gilpin County County Manager. Welcome. We're happy to have you with us. So quite quickly, I just want to say that this is largely the Colorado Department of Transportation CDOT show. So they're going to be leading you through this. They're the ones we're going to be working with. But I wanted to quickly speak to the city's presence with all of this, because there's been a lot of questions to the city and how we've been plugged in. I want you to know CDOT so far has been a fantastic partner with us. They have engaged us throughout this process to get our input, to hear from us what we know about the local area, about our residents' concerns, about the infrastructure needs in the area, and our thoughts. So we have been plugged in. Deputy City Manager Dawn Wick is back here. Hi, Dawn. Dawn, as I understand it, will be staying through the meeting. So if you do have questions about the city's perspective on something or things that we're thinking about in this process, as you guys do the open house, I highly encourage you to be able to come speak with Mr. Wick. He is by far the expert on this stuff, way better than me on it. So he's a former director of public works, and now he's deputy city manager, and he is going to be great at answering any and all questions for you, probably better than I could. So with that, I just wanted to thank CDOT for being here. We're going to have a very intentional process. As they mentioned in the last town hall, there's nothing firmly decided yet. What we're kind of doing is building the plane as we're going, but all of you are on that process with us. We need your feedback. We need your thoughts. We need your concerns, your hopes, your aspirations. And we don't want to just do something. We want you to be a part of it so that we make this really work for the North West Arvada area, to fit into the character of the community, to meet the needs in this area. And whether they are about the site itself for the train, or whether they are the larger concerns for the travel shed. Travel shed is kind of shorthand for the larger area of the transportation concern. Please do bring those to CDOT, bring this to us in Arvada. We are here to work with you. We are your representatives. And so thank you so much again for being here, for being a part of this, and we look forward to continuing this process with you. So with that, I will welcome Paul DeRocher.
Nailed it.
Yes. Paul DeRocher with the Colorado Department of Transportation.
So thank you again, Mayor, for that
introduction. As most of you know, this is our third meeting, so we've been here a couple of times before talking about this project with you. We recognize that this is really important, right? It's your dollars that we are putting to work at the state, and we want to put it to a great project. We think we have that, and with the support of the city of Arvada and all of the other officials that you kind of recognized earlier in the night, I think we're going to come out with a great project. So again, a big part of this reason why we're doing a public outreach project is so we can hear your concerns. So as you came in this evening, you saw there were public comment cards. So please take advantage of those. You leave your comments. That's a part of the way that we take that information into account and is a part of our planning process. So I also want to recognize a few folks just around the room. Our consultant team led by Joe Black, if you don't mind just raising your hand. Joe is representing WSP and has been a great partner. So as we disperse and you go out into the hallway, he's a great person to ask technical questions to, or just other questions, you know. Joe, what's your favorite color? I'm not sure. Anyway, bad question. And then Mo Sullivan is our Assistant Director of Passenger Rail. Recently hired. Mo is in her third week on the job, so maybe keep them softballs for Mo for right now. So thank you again for coming this evening. Let's jump into it. So safety and housekeeping, for those of you who didn't see them, the restrooms were to the left as you came in the door, out that way, emergency exits here to the back of the room and over to my left, just in case they are necessary. And as far as an agenda this evening, what we'd like to do is walk through what we have heard from you in previous open houses. Vision 2035 is a document that was published by the governor's office just a couple of weeks ago and contains a lot of great sort of visionary objectives for us that are very much in alignment with the Mountain Rail project. We're going to walk through some service options that we've come up with and that you may have seen on the boards as you walked in this evening. Station details, there's a bit of a a unique approach that we're taking to Arvada that I'll walk through. Talk about some train types and propulsion technologies that we're considering. Capital and operating costs, what goes into those, and then discuss some approaches to fare structure. So that's kind of what we have on tap for the evening. Within the last couple of open houses, what you can kind of see behind me here is a word cloud that combines all of the information that we've captured through those comment cards. And so things like parking, what are the shelter or the platforms going to look like? Will there be Wi-Fi on board? These are the kinds of things that really help us to plan when we start thinking about things like what do we need to put at the station. So that's how we take your feedback and bring it into the planning process. So please know that this is not a checkbox for us. Your feedback is extremely important and really guides this planning process. So I appreciate all of the feedback that we've gotten over the past two open houses, and please continue to provide it to us. Mission and objectives, just to recap here, we're trying to reinitiate passenger rail between Denver and Craig. And so we'll run through a few different service options. Some things that we're trying to do, some objectives we're trying to cover in this project is to create reliable, safe, and congestion-free transportation in this corridor. So that's something that I'm sure a lot of you don't experience on a day-to-day basis. I know just on my way to this open house coming down Indiana, as I'm sure most of you know, it's a challenge. And so part of our approach at the state level is to be thinking about diversifying your transportation options. There's a clear sort of picture in our mind is by being able to provide different transportation options, we can improve the condition of all of the network that we have. And so really being able to provide an opportunity to bike, to walk, to use transit, whether that be rail or bus, and also driving, they all kind of combine into an ecosystem in which they work together. But when we're only focusing on one, that may perhaps be driving, it creates those conditions that perhaps we experience on roads like Indiana and others. And we also want to foster economic vitality. On the complete west end of this alignment, the Yampa Valley, there's a process of economic transition happening there, where a lot of those communities have been supported with the coal industry. And we see the rail alignment as an opportunity to create new jobs with the both the construction and operation of this rail line, and also helps us to achieve our greenhouse gas reduction goals. So those are kind of some high-level reasons why we're doing this project. From a timeline standpoint, I talked about our open houses, both round 1 and round 2. Yes, that shows the last open house being this evening, but we are going to host additional opportunities for open houses in the future, whether they be virtual or in person. We're still kind of working that out. We strove really hard, the consultant team and our staff team, to complete this project by the end of the year. We need a little more time to be able to fully vet the capital and operating costs that go into getting this line up and running. We want to give that process the time that it deserves. And so while we will talk about the inputs that go into those costs, we're not going to be providing specific numbers. And when we do have that information in probably the end of the first quarter in 2025, we are going to bring that back to the community for your input. So just want you to know that it's not represented on the timeline, but that is something that we are working towards in the future. I talked about Vision 2035. Again, the governor's office published this a week or two ago. And you'll note that a lot of the vision and the objectives here that you see in the bullet points are very similar to the ones that we just went through with the mountain rail. And so I think with the Vision 2035, there's really an opportunity for the state and really setting a vision, not only at the state level, but also at the local level, to help achieve some of these things, like getting safe travel, whether it be driving, walking, biking, taking transit, those things that I ran through previously, being able to provide affordable and reliable transportation options, reducing inequities between rural and urban communities, and then of course reducing congestion. These are all in alignment, and I think the Mountain Rail project really helps to give something for that vision to move forward with. So at the federal level, what we see is that there has been historic investment in transportation over the last several years, including the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There are portions of this bill that are specifically for improving transit and transit projects like this one. And so those are opportunities that we intend to capitalize on. Of course, there is going to be a change in the federal administration. And so with that, there's likely to become changes within those federal bills. We at the state level need to be nimble with that. We want to be responsive. We want to be sensitive to what are the goals of this next administration, and we intend to respond to those. We think this project has an amazing amount of benefits, both at the safety level, benefiting both urban, suburban, and rural communities. So really hitting a cross-section of different objectives, whether it be on the red or blue side. We intend to be nimble and be able to really capture those federal dollars as they apply to this project. At the state level, we have Senator Zenziger here. She was really instrumental in helping provide these state dollars that you see here, these $200 million. We have, in the last legislative session, been able to capture oil and gas production fees, as well as fees placed on the rental cars. And so those are going to be generating $200 million annually. This is not chump change. It's really an historic amount of funding that we are providing at the state level, specifically for passenger rail service. There are opportunities to support transit service as well within these funds, but I think this project is really going to benefit, and hats off to our representatives for making that happen. At the regional and local level, I think a lot of the conversation, particularly in the Yampa Valley and in the Fraser Valley, is around the creation of a regional transit authority. Ours in the Denver metro region is, of course, RTD, so that exists here. And it really provides an opportunity to raise funding for transit investments. And if you think about it, those local trips, getting from your home or your work or to do errands, those are the kinds of trips you can do on a daily basis. Perhaps you're not going to the mountains every day. And so we think about those RTAs as being able to leverage those day-to-day trips. And that's really where we see some great opportunities to achieve mode shift within these contexts. And then, of course, complementary land use policies, being able to help support integrated housing, particularly for workforce. This is a major issue in the Yampa and Fraser Valleys, but of course here in the Denver metro area as well. Housing affordability is a major issue that, as we're able to complement those transit areas with housing, with access to work, we think there's a really symbiotic relationship there. So service options. This is the stuff you all came for. We have a few different options that we are considering right now. Service option A, of course, has, I suppose, the most dynamic aspect to it, and I'll kind of run through just so you understand what you're looking at here. The circles that aren't filled in are existing stations, and the ones that are filled in are stations that still need to be created. So we have a lot within that area between Denver and Fraser because, of course, we have the Winter Park Express, we have the California Zephyr. These are services that are operating today. So anything that you see here is in addition to those services. So within service option A between Denver and Granby, we are looking at 3 round trips, one of which is a long train that would go all the way to Craig. And then if you look a little further down the slide between Oak Creek and Craig, this is the Yampa Valley area. And really being able to provide 4 round trips, again, one of which would be the long train within that particular corridor. So kind of bookending each side of this alignment. Service option B really doubles down on that area between Denver and Granby. Again, being able to provide service within a corridor that's already has passenger rail is kind of that low-hanging fruit that we're trying to leverage, that state and federal funding towards achieving the greatest amount of service. 1 long train between Denver and Craig, and then service option C, really doubling those long train services between Denver and Craig, and 1 shorter trip between Denver and Kremling. So those are the service options that we're weighing now. Of course, there's a trade-off with each of them. And so we think this is a great kind of starting point to be having this conversation and really advance one of these service options forward. Also, you can't build Rome all at once. And so we want to be able to phase in the service. Again, knowing that we have existing service between Union Station and Granby, there's existing stations there. We think that's really the best place to be able to initiate in order to get service on the tracks first. Of course, we have the Winter Park Express, we have the California Zephyr. We want to add on that. One of the things that's a little bit of a challenge with the California Zephyr, if any of you have ever used it, is it's not always on time. And that's probably a nice way of saying that. But we think within this shorter corridor, we can keep that train on time better. The Winter Park Express has a much better on-time performance than the Zephyr. And so replicating that service pattern here within that first phase, we think we can build a solid product, one that has a great experience for people. And that's what's going to keep people coming back. You get on the train or the bus, it's not a great experience, you're probably not coming back. And so we want to build on what's already a very successful service, particularly the Winter Park Express. You try to go and buy a ticket between now and the end of the year, you're probably going to have a hard time. So that tells us that the market's responding really, really well to this service. And so we want to build on that. And so that's kind of where our focus is in phase 1, phase 2, and kind of all subsequent phases after phase 1. Don't necessarily have a timeline. I'm just kind of thinking about these in terms of where we can get the biggest bang for our buck. But again, in the Yampa Valley, where folks have really this incredible opportunity to build on that pre-existing service, that being the Yampa Valley Mail, that ceased service in 1968 in Craig, Hayden, Steamboat. There were existing stations there, and so really it's reigniting that and really leveraging those stations to be able to provide workforce housing for folks within that valley. And so again, that's something that we think is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. So looking at that in the second phase. And then the subsequent phase there is really that filling in the middle and getting that long train on the tracks. So this, of course, is going to be a long trip. One of the things that I think about a lot, and for those of you who have used the Zephyr, it may not be fast, but it is incredibly beautiful. And of course, we know that being Coloradans, perhaps sometimes we take it for granted, but this really, a lot of my staff had the opportunity to go along this entire alignment, and it is one of the most beautiful areas, not only in the state, but also the world. And so this is something that I think, from a transportation standpoint has a lot of value, but also a lot of value just from an economic development and tourism standpoint. The Rocky Mountaineer is a service that exists. Yes, it's very expensive, but I think what that demonstrates is there are people that are interested in using transportation, not just to get from point A to point B, but also in order to, see this amazing state that we live in. So that's kind of our approach to phasing here. When we think about stations, again, kind of knowing that there are many that already exist, when we think about new stations, these 5 criteria that you see here are really what we look at: regional connectivity, how easy is it to get to the station; economic development, what are the opportunities, particularly for workforce housing that I talked about. Those are things that are very, very important to us as we evaluate those locations. Environmental sustainability and being respectful to the environment as we build this corridor out. Multimodal choice, trying to figure out ways that folks can get to the station, not just by driving, being able to bike, to walk, to use transit, getting those connections in place, and then of course leveraging existing infrastructure. This speaks to really continuing to serve those stations that are already in existence, and then also the infrastructure that's there. I mean, we have an existing railroad. It would be extremely expensive, not only for the right-of-way acquisition, but just the development of a new railroad in 2024. So because this railroad exists, the project exists, and so we're trying to capitalize on that, knowing that there's really an opportunity right now to do so. So thinking about the West Metro area, we aren't going to the level of putting a dot on the map in Arvada or the West Metro area, because we feel like there needs to be due process to figure out where that dot goes. And so Mayor Simpson talked about our relationship and kind of ongoing conversations with Don and other staff at the city. We feel like there's an opportunity in 2025 to be having this conversation with the community to take into account concerns around land use, around land development, and give that process some time to mature. We don't want to rush this. We're trying to capitalize on funding and really be able to figure out a service plan for how the trains run back and forth, but we know there's a broader conversation that needs to happen at the local level, and that's why you don't see a dot on the map in Arvada or in this West Metro area. So we're going to be leveraging our consultant team to be able to help that conversation around where does this station make sense in Northwest Arvada. You heard the mayor's comments around maintaining that character of Northwest Arvada. That's something that we as CDOT recognize probably a better conversation to be had at the local level. And so we want to give the city and staff there the opportunity to have that conversation with you all. So that's kind of our thinking as far as why you don't see a dot on the map here. That really provides a runway for you all to have that conversation in the coming year. When we think about train sets, this is really within each of these, there's pros and cons. So locomotive haul, that's probably what you're all most familiar with. There can be a locomotive both on the front end or the back end of the train in order for the train to go in either direction. In some cases, there's only one on one end, and in which case the train has to do some pretty clever maneuvers in order to turn around. Takes a lot of track, takes a lot of time. With something like a push-pull operation, you can achieve sort of back and forth where the engineer simply walks from one end of the train to the other. Not diesel, but sort of propulsion agnostic, but multiple units are a little different in the terms of the power being delivered to each wheel and axle, along this train. And so Again, pros and cons with each of them, but just giving you an idea in terms of what we were thinking about this. There's questions, is this light rail, is this commuter rail, is it intercity rail? The locomotive is really kind of part of what dictates that, along with the track and other things like that. And so these are things that we're taking into consideration as we think about how can we achieve speed, how can we achieve maneuverability, and have a little bit more nimbleness with this project. Also thinking about train propulsion technology. Of course, diesel is what's been around. It's been tried and true in the industry for a very, very long time. And so that's sort of the standard, I would say, in terms of what is powering a lot of these train sets. But there's a lot of emphasis on electric, battery electric, and hydrogen, and we intend to evaluate all of those as we think about things. You know, the Moffett Tunnel is obviously an asset that we have and also was built 100 years ago. So there's no ventilation system there. There are operating conditions in which the tunnel has to stay vacant for, I think it's a half an hour for another train to go through. So those are considerations that we need to take into account as we're thinking about the propulsion technology. If you're not using diesel, does that allow you to get more trains through the tunnel without that waiting period? So those are the kinds of things, and that's why that relates to the service options and why the propulsion is important for us to consider. So talked about the unique characteristics, and these are just some pictures here of parts of this railroad that I wanted to share with you this evening. It's truly a mountain railroad, as the slide says. And I think with this, it really gives you all an idea, kind of as the animation stops here, you can see some of the signal, the technology there. Again, it's over 100 years old in many cases, the rail bed, in some cases, the rail itself. And so we know that we are going to need to make investments here. That's part of those capital costs that we need to take a look at. Do we need to acquire right-of-way? So when you're thinking about that fun exercise that you did maybe in 6th or 7th grade, where person A comes from Kansas City and person B is coming from Denver, where are they going to meet? That's something that we do on a bigger scale, thinking about the numbers of trains that we are trying to put on the tracks here, back to the service options that I ran through. And we need to determine where additional sidings go, and there's potentially a need to acquire right-of-way within that. And then having to upgrade those signals, potentially implementing positive train control. This is a technology that prevents trains from colliding and really needs to exist here in order to achieve a safe operations. That's fundamental to what we want to achieve here. Stations and the elements that go into that stations, the platforms, the waiting areas, things like that, operations and maintenance, what goes into that, the facility itself where you clean and actually rehab these vehicles. Those are all things that go into the capital costs. The operating costs, of course, the labor, the crew that's actually operating the train, utilities, the materials that go into that maintenance, administration and contracted services. So these are all things, again, that as we get these numbers and we're able to solidify them, we'll bring these back to you. And I think the important question here is, as we think about leveraging that state funding and think about leveraging that federal funding, how are we able to achieve this project? I mean, I know that's the question that it's in all of your minds right now, is how real is this? And we want to come back with you and give you that opportunity to give us an opportunity to answer that question. We also have the Front Range Passenger Rail project. That's another project. It's another priority of the state. And so these are the things that we have to think about as we're phasing in projects, and how far can the money take us. So that's something that we intend to share with you all, just in terms of sharing our state priorities. And then lastly, just wanted to share some approaches to fare structure. I think, in conversations with the governor and the governor's staff, it's knowing that his priority is making this an affordable service. This is something that I know, we talked about it in terms of housing, but transportation costs comprise a significant part of your household expenses. And so we recognize that. We want to make this something that is a viable transportation option on a daily basis, and the fare has a big part of that. And so looking at things like resident discounts, senior discounts, youth discounts. If you've ever used Bustang, you know that we provide a half-off rate for folks between 2 and 12. And so that's something that is potentially transferable to the rail operation as well. So I think something like simplicity, fairness, how do you transfer between a state-operated operation and perhaps something like RTD? Those are all things that we're thinking about in terms of just making it simple, right? We want to make it simple so you don't have to go through a whole exercise to figure out how to use transit. I've been there. I think that's one of the things that we really are thinking about in terms of making this accessible. It's not just about getting the trains on the track, it's about making it easy to use. So with that, just want to talk about our next steps. We have a legislative report that's due at the end of the calendar year. That's going to give an up-to-date snapshot in terms of everything that we ran through this evening. We're going to be working with the city of Arvada to support that local station area planning and giving that process its due time, and then publishing that final service development plan probably around the end of Q1 2025. And again, plan to publicize that to you all. I would say the best way to get that information is just make sure that you signed up for the email distribution list. No, we're not going to try to sell you anything, except maybe a train. Just want to be able to make sure that you're getting that information. And then also, as that information comes out late February, early March, go to coloradomountainrail.org and you can gather that information. So that's what I had for you this evening. Wanted to also provide an opportunity for folks to ask any questions. We can do that for about 10 minutes and then we can disperse to the boards. So any questions to start? Yes, Mike.
I just want to something that hasn't been covered yet is more on the security side of things. Oh, hey, thanks for that. Being in transportation myself, I don't know how CDOT operates with maybe TSA or how the tickets get sold. And then as far as crime on an actual train, you will be in diverse locations, probably pretty far away from services. How does that part get handled? So
yeah,
first part is, more of the buying of tickets and understanding who's on the train. The second part is what happens if something actually goes down.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, great question. Let me start with the second part first. So if you've ever ridden the RTD A line, you'll note that a lot of the staff there are armed officers on those trains. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that that's a longer distance service. And it provides that kind of extra layer of security that perhaps you don't see on the buses or other services like that. So I think that's a model we can definitely take a look at. We are going to be taking a stab at what the staffing is for this service, and I think that's something that we could definitely take into account. As far as screening for passengers, honestly, that is something that I would probably need to take a closer look at. I'm wondering, Joe, if you have thoughts in terms of how other intercity operations have evaluated this throughout the country.
Sure, yeah. So if you've ever ridden Amtrak, certain trains have to be reserved, right? You have to make a reservation. So you have to provide your name. And so those type of things there's some, I'm not going to say there's some vetting there. I think they collect that data and it doesn't really, it doesn't get screened, right? Is what I'm trying to say. If you ride in the Northeast, if you ride Amtrak between, say, Washington and Boston, anywhere in there, it's completely non-reserved. So nobody knows who's getting on. And you'll see on those Amtrak trains as well, there are always armed officers in the stations and on the trains. So it's something that we haven't had. I mean, I know TSA has taken an interest in rail system safety, but they haven't gone to that step that they've gone to with aviation just yet because for a number of different reasons, logistic reasons and things like that. But I think, that idea that like a transit security force, partnerships with the cities, right? So the city police departments are aware of the station, where it is, when time the trains come in and things like that is part of that whole. And a part of delivering this project a little further on in the process will be to complete a system safety program plan, which will include things like that, security and also the safety of passengers.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and just to build on that a little bit more too, I think the other thing we're thinking about is emergency response. So if something, is challenged with the rail, that there's an opportunity for first responders to access hazmat materials. So again, as Joe mentioned, those will all be kind of evaluated in that safety plan. So great question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
There's an existing rail line from Glenwood Springs to that corridor. Is it possible to hook that up to this whole system?
It is possible, definitely. The Zephyr, as you may know, operates on that alignment. The way I think about it is in terms of phases, right? So our funding at the state level, and if we're lucky enough to get federal funding, is only going to take us so far. So right now we're focused on this alignment between Craig and Denver. That's what this service development plan is focused on. But what that does is get increased passenger rail service between Denver, Granby, and perhaps all the way to Kremling before this alignment that we're studying turns north to head up towards the Yampa Valley. And so it puts the building blocks in place so that if we wanted to look at a service development plan, say to get to Glenwood Springs or perhaps even Grand Junction, we have some existing service that we could build on there. So I think it's definitely, if you were to ask my staff, they would all say, great idea, it's amazing, and I don't disagree. Really, I think it's kind of just a matter of resource allocation where we need to kind of focus our efforts on this alignment first. And then I think really, for me, it's proving that we can be successful. We haven't ever operated a passenger rail service at the state level in Colorado. And so this is kind of an first opportunity, again, Front Range being another project we're looking at, but we don't have the experience with operations. So demonstrate success where we can, and then use that success to advocate for future or expanded rail opportunities through the state. Good question, though.
Okay, now it sounds like this train from Denver to Craig would be 3-4 hours?
In terms of the total trip time?
Yeah.
So don't have that information with me right now. I think we have looked at more segmented travel times. The train between Craig and Denver will be long. I can tell you that right now with certainty. I don't know the exact times, but I think where you see more time competitiveness with the automobile is our ability to leverage our existing state asset of the Moffett tunnel and being able to really have a time competitive trip between, say, Arvada and Winter Park, and perhaps even between Craig and Steamboat.
All right, so the part that I don't get right now is you've often mentioned that this train's gonna help with workforce housing. I don't see the correlation between a train that takes half a day and where people are gonna be commuting with it, thus having workforce housing.
Yeah, I think that's within those shorter segments though, and that's kind of where I see the application to workforce housing. So within the Yampa Valley and even within that segment between, say, Arvada and Winter Park, you could imagine a scenario where somebody could potentially live in Rollinsville and work in Winter Park, and that's completely enabled by the train. And obviously that's going to be a much faster trip than driving that trip. And so that's where we think there's opportunities for workforce housing is probably in those shorter segments, but don't disagree. That long trip, it's going to be long and it's going to be beautiful. And I think that the people who are going to use that particular trip to go between Denver and Craig are probably going to be tourists. But again, the tourists are not, necessarily coming from out of state. They're also residents. I would love to have been able to do that trip when we went up to Steamboat on Monday. Getting over Rabbit Ears Pass was pretty interesting. And so I think that when you have those opportunities for folks who maybe have a little more time, they're on their leisure time, that's where that long trip's really going to come into play. But the workforce housing is really in those shorter segments, again, between, say, Arvada and Winter Park, and perhaps the communities even just a bit west of Winter Park, and then in that Yampa Valley section. And then working with the communities, just like we will with the city of Arvada, to define what they want that station area to look like. That is a local conversation in terms of what the design, how they want that to develop, who they want that to kind of be marketed to. And so that's kind of our approach to connecting both the transit investment to housing. Does that help? Okay.
So I live in North West Arvada, and Candelas is the subdivision that I live in. And also I'm a board member of Candelas, which is the Beaumont Metropolitan District. Now, the city of Arvada has not in any way contacted us to let us know that this railway was proposed, or I just happened to look at Nextdoor. Thank goodness someone posted it on Nextdoor. What I'm concerned about is how big are these stations going to be? Is there going to be long-term parking? And if so, is it going to be secured? Because we all know that Denver Airport is having some issues with their parking. And I know personally of people that have had their vehicles stolen and never seen again. So I know that there's some residents in my community that are concerned that this might bring crime into the area. I mean, it's pretty remote where we live, for the most part, and it gets really windy there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But really what I'm here, lots of people love it, love the idea, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to be hearing horns, the trains, blaring, and it's just pretty quiet other than the wind. So if that's something you can answer, that would be great.
I think the heart of your question is really around what will the station look like. I know there's a second part to your question, which is what is the impact that the actual train operation will have on the area, and kind of come back to that a little bit, because I think really the first part of your question in terms of the station area, that's where, again, CDOT will be helping support a local planning process for both the station siting, but then also, really defining what that station design is going to look like. And so there's that opportunity for you and any other kind of community members who want to participate in that process to really kind of weigh in. So that's going to be kicking off in 2025. So for our part, for the CDOT part, we want to be able to look at how this railroad can operate, kind of looking at, I guess, the operational elements of that, and recognizing that those land use, land development questions really are best answered with a separate process that we'll initiate next year. So that's where I think a lot of your questions will start. As far as like the train noise and things like that, obviously there is existing train services on the line, both freight and passenger rail. What we're talking about within the context of this region, I'll go back to the service options, just so you can get an idea of scale, is really an additional anywhere between 3 and 4 round trips a day in this section. So over the course of, 24 hours a day, you're probably talking about, a train every 4 hours or something like that. So it is not going to be a situation where there's a train coming through every 15 minutes or something like that. That is not what we're proposing for this service. So I guess with that, there will be some impact, but perhaps not, an all-day constant impact to your quality of life.
You could also note,
I'm sorry?
you could also note that the train traffic devoted to coal will be decreasing in the same time frame.
True, yes.
The number of trips overall.
So coal traffic, that's our Transportation Commissioner Cook. The coal traffic on this alignment is decreasing. So I talked about a lot of the existing coal production that's happening in the Yampa Valley. That's one of the primary freight customers for Union Pacific, who owns this line. And it has been on a steady decline for several years. And one of the largest coal producers in that region is going to be closing in the next couple of years. So that freight traffic is going to diminish significantly, in that time frame. And so, yeah, there's probably a little bit of a balancing act where perhaps the freight traffic is diminishing and that's being replaced by passenger service. And so again, the impact perhaps maybe not even noticeable.
Is there gonna be long-term parking there? Is that something that you guys are proposing as well?
Yeah, and I think that's, again, I think there's probably no scenario where there's not parking for a station, but I think that's, again, like, what is the scale of that parking? Is it a garage? Is it a surface lot? What are the other opportunities to connect trails, sidewalks, different things like that? What is the development around those stations? That's the conversation that we definitely want to have next year, and then give you all an opportunity to kind of weigh into that. And then also, obviously, where's the station? Yes, sir?
Will the service development plan indicate the number of acres that are required approximately for the, I'll call it the West Arvada station?
I would say just in terms of a range, yeah, I mean, like we.
That would be in the
We're gonna
service
have-
development plan.
Yeah, in the
Yeah.
service development plan, we will have an idea in terms of, we know we need 1,000 feet of tangent and straight rail in order to get a siding, or not a siding, but a platform there in order to accommodate the length of train that we're proposing here. And so we need that, and then of course there's, space available or space needed in order to accommodate parking and some of the other transportation elements that we need in that space, so yes.
Thank you.
I think this gentleman and then the lady in the back.
Hi, I'm Mike Schweitzer from Boston White Coalition. On our live stream, we have a couple of questions. A gentleman wants to know if this rail will have a stop at Steamboat Springs Resort. And the other question is approximate timeline for when this will be built.
Yes, so Steamboat Springs Resort, we see as a unique market to itself, so there will be a stop there. So that's the first part of your question, and the second part was around timing. So the timing for this project, our goal is to initiate expanded passenger rail service within this Denver to Granby area by 2027. And so, I talked about this kind of at the top of the meeting, but what we show in the service development plan and any of these service options is a final configuration. There's going to be needs to acquire rolling stock, we need an operator, we need to upgrade the line. And in order to do that, there's a likelihood that we will phase in service, even within these phasing options. And so more than likely, what will happen is that we are able to achieve, hopefully, our goal, and really driven by some of the governor's priorities, to get expanded service on the tracks by 2027. Subsequent phases, we don't have a timeline associated with that right now. I will say, one of the things that we can look to and kind of have confidence in is that the state, in association with Winter Park and Alterra Resorts, has been able to negotiate an expanded Winter Park Express service, whereas normally that service would only operate between January and March. We are starting it in December this year. And we're also offering that service beginning in 2025, not just on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but also on Thursday and Monday as well. So that's, again, we're taking baby steps. We're iterating on what's already successful. The goal might be eventually to have the Winter Park Express be, year round and really kind of build on it so that we're achieving this. And so that's going to be kind of our approach, is to really iterate on things, acquire rolling stock, and get this service in place as we are able. So just kind of wanted to ad lib on that a little bit, just to give an idea in terms of our approach.
Thank you.
Did I miss one? Oh, I'm sorry, yes, she did have her hand raised first. Thank you.
So I apologize, I missed the beginning of your presentation. Up on the screen here, you have West Metro. Has that area been reduced down to Arvada only, or are there still other sites you might consider in West Metro?
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of talked about this a little bit towards the end there, I think with the lady's question here. We are going to be initiating a separate planning process to determine the specific location for what we're referring to as West Metro. Could it exist outside of the city of Arvada? Possibly. Most of the sites, I think that are possible or probably in Arvada, but again, that conversation, that kind of specificity around where does the station go and what does the station look like, we want to have a separate planning process for that, so that we're not rushing it to kind of get to that decision when we finish this service development plan. And we intend to do so in the next couple of months. That conversation is probably going to need to, mature a little bit over a bit longer time period than that. And so that's where we'll kind of define that location. Yeah, so quick question in the back and then up here, and then probably we'll kind of cut it off at that.
In the Rocky Mountain West, there are two kind of long-distance commuter operations currently in existence out of Utah between Ogden and Provo, and in New Mexico between Santa Fe down to south of Albuquerque. Is there anything that can be learned from those operations, and have you visited those folks? It's not quite the same environmental application, but is there any potential for knowledge to be gained from those folks to benefit this operation?
Yeah, great question. I'm actually going to call on Matt Sybil, our Utah representative. He's part of the team from WSP. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. Yes, it's a great question. So there's a lot to be learned from other operators, as you point out, New Mexico, Utah, California. There's a lot of different folks who run service like this. So CDOT does a great job of collaborating with other agencies to do just that. So learn best practices. Similar running environment in Utah as the Front Range here, so there's a lot to be learned from that as well. So great question, and the industry is very good at sharing best practices and just how to do things more efficiently and effectively. So thanks for the question.
Question here, and then I think we're going to go to the board. Again, after the lady asked her question, I just want to invite you all to stick around and ask questions, because there's a lot of other folks that know about this than me. Go ahead.
Okay, so I have found myself reluctant to trust any government organization, just to be quite frank with you. And I'm wondering about the pitching of this to us, and it's a little, I'm wondering like what the tax ramifications will be when it comes to how much more that we're gonna have to pay for something that we probably are never gonna use. Like, this population of people is unlikely to use this mode of transportation, if I'm gonna be quite frank with you. And I just wanna be upfront about that and ask about how much more we're gonna have to pay for some service that we're probably never gonna use.
Okay. Who thinks they would use this service? Just curious. Okay.
Thanks for
And
I don't mean to be
yeah, I was just trying to read the
Yeah,
chat
sure,
a little bit,
sure.
because I think you had made some statements I just wanted to qualify a little bit. I don't think we've done a great job of delivering projects in Colorado, particularly rail projects.
Agreed.
And I think your skepticism is well-founded. I mean, I don't dispute it. I think that for us, the way we intend to deliver this project is by taking it in phases. And part of perhaps, I think, the mistake that we've made in past projects, perhaps past programs, thinking about the Fast Tracks program and Northwest Rail, that's been a boondoggle, and I'll just call it what it is. And I think that where we can learn from those mistakes is to not bite off too much. And I think that opportunity is really to give, the opportunity to, again, focus on this area between Denver and Granby. There's existing passenger rail service, there's existing infrastructure. And so there isn't any thought in our mind that we will need to go back to the state legislature and say, look, in order for us to build this project out, we need more money. Can you help us? Which of course is a part of your tax funds. There isn't any question that that is something that we intend to do.
I need to know like some kind of dollar amount though, like we're
Yeah.
talking about in terms of percentage, because I don't need any
Yeah.
fluff. I don't need any
Sure.
of that.
And so that's kind of where I said at the top of the meeting, we are not sharing the capital and operating costs now because we want to be really clear about what those are. And then in the first quarter of 2025, when we do have those costs, we can come back to you and say, with the funding that we have available, with our income, we can afford this part of the project. So this is a plan, right? And it does have those costs associated with it. What we need to do is go back and really combine that with the revenue and give you that confidence to know what our strategy is in order to achieve the project. So
Are we gonna have any input on that though, like at that point, in
Yeah.
terms of if the project is going to go through?
So your question being, if we propose a strategy that perhaps you want to provide feedback on, is there an opportunity? Absolutely, yeah,
And is that gonna make a difference though in like the outcome of the project?
absolutely. This isn't for show. I guess it's hard for me. You have your lived
Sorry,
experience.
I know, I'm being
And I don't-
spicy right now.
I don't dispute that in any way.
It's my money,
Yeah,
single
yeah,
mom, you
absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
Gotta say.
Yeah, I totally don't dispute that. And so for me, as a government representative, my goal is always to be transparent.
Ugh.
Can I backbone off of her question?
We're gonna cut it off on questions here. And so I just wanna kind of like be consistent with what I said at the top. If you'd like to talk with me, feel free to come on up. But, you know, I
That's not
think
being transparent.
what
No,
we're,
you guys are not being transparent, like, in this
I had,
question and answer.
I'm not here
I don't-
to add, I'm not here to add any fire to it. I work in finance, so my question was just very simply, which might help out answering her question, is I noticed there's a lot of leaning towards government funding, whether it comes from state and the federal side. Have you guys looked at the opportunity of PABs, private activity bonds or conduit bonds, to look at the public-private sector versus just the government, which would offset and alleviate
Yep.
some of the tax burden?
Thank you.
there is, absolutely. And I think that's part of what we intend to share. So once we know the costs, then we can come back and, as you know, kind of assign that revenue. And that's where I think we build confidence, right? Like, it's one thing for me to come and say, this is a project and this is what we want to do. It's another thing for us to talk about strategy and for us to be able to really take a hard look at the numbers and share that with you all is our intention. And we wanted to provide an opportunity for us to understand what those numbers were so that we weren't providing a number that we couldn't stand behind. And so that's a process, and it takes some very specific knowledge, some, you know, folks that know a lot more about financing than I do. And so that's kind of where our process is. But they're great questions, and I don't think you're being spicy. I think you're being real, and I appreciate it. So I guess with that, I just want to say thank you all for you know, coming and asking questions. Help us to think through this project and deliver it in a way that we can be proud of it. That's our intention. So thank you again.
Oh, yeah, wow.
That's cool. People could ask questions on that.
Great to have, it's great to have long-term partners.
Hey, guys.
Lauren was here, but she had to leave.
Hey. Sorry, I didn't recognize you.
Yeah.
Hey, Gina.
Yeah, we met at the last one.
Last time, yeah.
Get out of the way.
Yeah, no problem. That's cool that we're getting